Not this again. Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. So this week we are going to revisit the Peacock hollow form. As you've seen from the thumbnail, things haven't gone the way that I wanted them to go, but I will say this, that to date, this is probably the best resin that I've done. So if you're interested in how I achieve this look, you're gonna have to stick around and watch the video because I talk through the video a lot. It's very hard for me to do a voiceover on this afterwards. It's best for me sometimes to talk into the camera while I'm doing things, and then that way things don't get missed. So this is a small maple burl, and I'm just cleaning it up, getting it ready to put in the bucket. And I'm just using flat tip screwdrivers, and I've got a pick tool there as well. This is a brass brush, and it works really well removing removing bark. Well, it can remove resin too, but you definitely want to clean off all that bark because you don't want to have any adhesion issues between the bark and the resin. So bark's not stable enough. With this resin, with its long open time, it's probably not a factor, but I prefer to remove the bark because the bark typically will be softer than the surrounding wood. So then when you sand it, you have issues with it being indented where the bark is. So that's why I always try to remove all the bark that I can so that we don't have any issues like this. So here's what we're going to do. It is late afternoon. We're going to mix all of our colors tomorrow morning. I think the plan is to still use the vacuum chamber with the blue like I did the first time, but we're going to let everything else sit for 12 hours. Actually, I guess maybe I'm going to put the other colors in as well and let it sit for 12 hours and not touch it, and then pull deep into the resin and up and down, and hopefully that's going to give us the peacock feather look that we're looking for. So I'll see you at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yay. This week we're going to be using Designer Epoxy's deep casting epoxy. This is the same epoxy that I used on the first Peacock hollow form, and you definitely need a deep casting epoxy here because in total there's probably about 4 or 5 inches of resin in depth. So you definitely need a deep casting epoxy in order to do a casting like that. So we're going to start off with the rainbow blue, and this is very similar to the last time, and I'm going to put a little bit of blue Laguna in with it just to soften it a little bit. Emerald green, crystal purple, and pure gold. Now the combination of these 4 colors should make a very interesting looking form if you can get them to work properly for you. And I watch a lot of videos, and I know that there's a lot of issues trying to get this color separation. So there will be a number 3 coming up sometime. I don't know when it's going to be, but I will certainly revisit it. I really just want the bottom of this piece to be the wood, and then the whole top of the hollow form to be resin. So that's why I'm going to put a fair bit of resin in here, and it may look odd to you, but that's why I'm doing it that way. Let's see if we need more. I'm sure we're going to, of the blue anyway. Yeah, I'm just going to mix up a little bit more, not too much more, probably about half of that. So here's another 18 ounces. All right, let's get out the vacuum chamber. All right, so I only managed to get here at 6:30. It is now 7 o'clock. And so we're going to pull a vacuum on this for 2 to 3 hours, and then we'll combine the green, and then we'll inject the other ones, and then we'll let this sit for 12 hours total, and then we'll do some other stuff. All right, let's see how we make out here. I know that there's some confusion around the pressure pot and the vacuum chamber. With the vacuum chamber, what I'm doing is removing air that's in the resin. When you mix up resin, you introduce air into it, so you're moving the air to the resin, and you're also pulling a vacuum and collapsing the cell structure in the wood. And then when you release the vacuum, that wood then draws the resin in, essentially stabilizing it. It makes for a much better casting. Interesting to note that the the other epoxy, there's hardly any air coming out of it because everything was all hand mixed. And there's lots of air coming out of the blank that's got the wood in it because, of course, there's lots of airspace in the wood. That just goes to show you that mechanical mixers, if I'd used a mechanical mixer, it would have been a lot more air coming out of all this epoxy. So you're about to see something that you shouldn't do. If I had just released the vacuum very, very slowly, it wouldn't have been an issue, but I cranked open that valve too much, too fast, and it just sprayed resin everywhere. So be careful of that. All right, so I'm just going to leave this now for, I don't know, a couple hours anyway, and then we will see you then. Hopefully this works out. Yeah, you got to be really careful when you're venting. What happened here was there's a little valve here, and when I opened that, it shot right down into the epoxy and sprayed up onto the lid. So watch out for that, people. So it's been in here for 2.5 hours. Keep an eye on this resin level to see if it drops. The other ones probably shouldn't drop too much, but we'll see how much the resin gets absorbed by the wood here. It's a little hard to see that in real time when you're releasing the vacuum. I was hoping that we'd be able to see it better here when the footage was sped up a bit, but the wood itself by this point wasn't really absorbing much resin. Hard to tell if it dropped or not. Easier to tell in the footage afterwards. All right, so let's get these out of here. I'm not so sure that I'm going to combine them just yet. I might let them sit for a little bit longer. They're still cool. They haven't, there's no thermal reaction yet. So yeah, let's get these out of here and I'll move them into my clean room and we'll do the pouring there. So it's been 4 hours. The epoxy is still quite liquidy, as you can see, but you can see how it's still. And so what I want to do, I don't want to tempt fate here, because if there is some sort of convection action happening, I certainly want that to happen when the other colors are in here, but not a massive extent if you follow. So I'm going to dump the green in, and last time I poured it around the edge, and I'll actually try and do this with my right hand. I'll try and do the same thing again. And yes, I know there's a lot of resin on the top of this, but that's what I'm going for. That's the look that I'm going for. Alright, so we're going to do the injection method again. I didn't have the right size tubing, but this is heat shrink. So that fits well onto this little syringe. So I'm going to go all the way down and fill it as I pull out, and then hopefully, I mean, hey, look at that. That there is absolutely fantastic. I don't know if it's going to stay like that. When I get done pouring all this, I'm actually going to let the camera run for a while, and we'll see this kind of move around. I'm sure it will in slow motion. Should be interesting to watch. I've just been actually kind of filling the syringe like this. I find that it's a lot easier to do so. The epoxy was actually starting to thicken up a bit, so I was having a hard time drawing it into the syringe. So pouring it into the syringe actually works way better. So if you want to use this method, that's probably the method to use. So here's our purple. All right, so I had to put a new battery on. A little blob come up from below. Don't know why. So this is 10 minutes of footage that's condensed down into a minute. And, to be perfectly honest with you, I thought that I had this thing licked. Uh, for 10 minutes, this epoxy is sitting there and really not a whole lot is happening. Every now and then there may be a bubble that comes up from down below, but for the most part, the epoxy looks the way, like right there, whatever's going on there, I don't know, it must have been a bubble. I would have been totally happy with that look, but at the end of this, I was saying, okay, like maybe I've got this thing beat, but it just wasn't there. It again, the convection action when it's starting to cure just really combined a lot of the colors, but I would have been totally happy to see it look like this at the end of when the casting's starting to harden up. So like I said earlier, we were going to do a third one uh, because I've got to do this until I get it right because that's just the way I am. All right, well, that's been about 10 minutes. Hopefully that was interesting for you. I never watched any of it, so I'll have to see it after. Anyway, what I'll do is if this isn't working, if it stays like this, I'm probably not going to mess with it. I'll leave it the way it is. But if it does all combine, then I will come back probably around 6 o'clock. Yeah, somewhere around 6 o'clock p.m. and we'll do some swirls in it. So hopefully things stay the way they are and I don't have to do that. So this has been sitting here for 10 hours now. And as you can see, it's still quite liquidy. So the temperature is coming up on this, and all these swirls were just put in by me, just seeing how it goes. One thing of note though, the purple seems to be hugging the outside of the bucket, so don't really understand that. But this is a little wooden skewer, and that's what I'm going to use to put the swirls in when we hit the right temperature or the right thickness. Now when I came out here, the epoxy was sitting at 32. It's now 33. I don't know if that's going to pick that up or not. So it is warmer. I mean, it's definitely warmer than when I first put it out here. So the reaction is starting to happen, but I think we're going to have to let it sit for at least another couple of hours. I might come out and check on it every hour to see how it is, because I'm a little concerned that maybe it's just going to cook off. So we don't want that to happen. So anyway, I'll come out every hour and check on it. And when it comes time to put the final design in. Now I've done that, and it'll be interesting to see if that is still there an hour from now or 2 hours from now. But we'll see. I'll keep you up to date. All right, so this is the 12-hour mark. Still very, very liquidy. I guess we're going to let it sit a little bit longer. If it cured like that, I guess I'd be okay with it. There's definitely some color variation, but this color here is looking to be very similar to the first one that I did. I guess we'll talk to you in a couple hours, because I should mention that this is 38 degrees now. So it's climbing slowly. But anyway, we'll see you in a couple hours. All right, so this has been 13 hours, and it's definitely starting to thicken up a bit, but it's still very, very liquidy. It is, the temperature on it right now is, last time I checked it was 40. Yeah, it keeps going between 39.5 and 40. I don't know, maybe this thing's no good. But I'm going to let it sit for another hour, and hopefully we're going to be able to do some designs in this. What I want to do is just lightly touch it here on the surface, and I want to see if that is still there when I come back out in another half hour. I've been checking on this for a half hour now. Just because I'm a little worried about it start to cure too fast and then it'll be too late. So if that design is still there in an hour, then I'm going to say that we're probably safe to put some sort of design in here. All right, so it's been 14 hours and that is 42.4 Celsius. Now initially on the top here, it really doesn't look to be like it's thickened up a whole lot, as you can see right there. But when you go down, you can see how much thicker the resin seems to be. So I'm trying to get some color. Hopefully they haven't all kind of melted together, but there's still kind of a purple color around the outside. So I'm going to go down and then up, and I'm just going to do this motion all the way around it, and hopefully that'll give us a feather look. I don't know, we'll have to see here. Part of the reason why I'm doing this is because last time I found that some of that gold was sitting near the bottom, so I'm hoping to pull some of that up by doing this process along with the purple. Well, I mean, that's definitely a really cool pattern. Let's hope it stays. So I guess we'll know tomorrow morning when I come out. I'll show you when that happens. Hopefully, looks like that. It's still more on the blue side than I hoped for. I'm tempted to mix up a little bit of green and try and drop it in, but I don't know. If this isn't successful, we will try again. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow morning. All right, so it's the next day. It's around noon, and this is where the epoxy sits. It's still soft. It's cool to the touch. Temperature is 26 degrees. So, you know, I'm hoping that there's going to be colors deep down inside of it. There is dark blue here, and then what looks to be blue laguna, and there's obviously some dark blue there. So, you know, there's some color variation. I'm just hoping to see some gold and green and purple. But I guess we'll have to wait a couple days to find out. See you then. Here we are 72 hours later. You know, I can see hints of color in there. Like for instance, this is a stronger blue than say the surrounding blue. So, you know, maybe there's some color variations inside here. Anyway, I guess we won't know until we get it out. So let's do that. What do you think? It's looking kind of blue. Well, with that said though, looks like there's some purples down in there. This is going to be all turned away anyway, so because of course this is going to be the base. So you know what, maybe we did get some color in there. All right, let's get our centers and get it on the lathe. It's off a little bit, but it ain't too bad. Just turned off one of my lights here so that we can get a better look at this. Now, I do not remember this in the last or the first casting that we did for this. And you can see it almost looks like a wave. And I'm assuming that that's probably got to do with me taking that stick and trying to pull material up and make some designs in here. I mean, this here is pretty cool if it stays like that in the casting. But you know, I just thought I'd point that out because it's weird. Anyway, let's get it done. Starting off with the Hercules here, you know, a bit frustrating. I mean, the patterns, don't get me wrong, the patterns in this piece are very unique, very cool, but it's just really not what I was going for. So what I think the problem is this. What I should have done was kept those colors separate till probably about the 12-hour mark and then combine them in the resin. The problem with that is that these resins cure differently based on volume, or that's my understanding. And I just had these visions that the large casting was going to cure, and then I wasn't going to be able to combine the other colors into the casting. So that's why I combine the colors after the vacuum chamber. Now, if I had to put those colors in with the blue, all the other colors in with the blue in the vacuum chamber, well, it definitely would have been all one color for sure, and no doubt it would have been just predominantly blue. Now, with with all of that said, we've definitely learned something here, and to put those very unique swirl marks that you'll see in this piece, I'll show it here very shortly. To me, that is one of the coolest looking pieces of resin I have done to date, for sure. It's too bad that the color isn't there, though. That's the only thing that's really lacking. I decided to use the glue block on this piece because it wasn't overly large depth-wise, so I wanted to make sure that I could maximize the depth on this piece. It's the resin is an absolute fun thing to learn, but it can be a frustrating thing to learn. And I'm sure that people that work with resin probably can understand that statement. It to date has given me some of the coolest bowls that I've ever made, including hollow forms, of course. But it can be at times very frustrating. So I won't let this thing beat me, and we will be back with number three at some point. Got the glue block on, I've reversed it, so I'm just trimming up the outside, truing up the outside. And when I say truing up the outside, some people don't really fully understand what that means. It takes the wobble out of it, especially if you're going to be doing any hollowing and if you're going to be doing any drilling. It's best to try and take as much wobble out of the piece that you can, and of course that will make it so that it doesn't vibrate as well. So that's when I say truing it up, that's exactly what I mean. And I mean, just look at the figure in that resin. It's crazy. If you can do me a favor, if you can leave a comment down below in regards to what you like watching the most, bowls or hollow forms, that would be greatly appreciated. I know that the hollow forms are more on the artistic side, and that seems to be quite popular on my channel recently. I don't know if you can hear that rain in the background, but it is pouring. So it's rather evident that we've lost our colors again. But I'm going to say this, and this is straight up 100%. Look at the patterns in this. By letting that epoxy sit that long and then getting in there and moving it around, wow. When this is polished, it is going to be amazing. Now, it's decision time. What do you do here? This isn't very big. This is like maybe 7 inches, maybe even 6.5 inches across. So, I don't want to get rid of this. This is absolutely I think it is the best resin that I've done. As far as patterns and visual interest is concerned, it is absolutely amazing. So, for the most part, I think I'm going to keep this profile. I might taper it down a little bit on the back side, and then we'll do a hollow form, kind of something like this. I don't know. I'm not like 100% on this yet. I'll have to figure that out. Maybe I'll just move this in and we'll make a collar out of it. I'm just, wow. I mean, I've got this so that the camera can see the outside and the top, but look at that on the top. That is just, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. When that's polished, wow. All right, so anyway, I thought that I would share that with you. And I know that there's going to be some people there and say, well, how come you didn't put a spacer in here and save on resin and blah, blah, blah. You know what? The thing is, when you do that, you're committed to that design. There's no changing it. So That's why you're not going to probably see me do that very often unless it's something that I don't have a lot of. Like the Banksia pod vase, that's a prime example where I didn't have a lot of them. So then, I put that spacer in the center, and it ended up being a factor because in the very base of it, there was actually a little bit left over that I couldn't get rid of because it was getting too thin. So, hopefully everybody understands that. This is not a huge amount of resin here, so, it really shouldn't be an issue. But, I see it in the comments a fair bit, and that's why you won't typically see me put in spacers unless I really absolutely have to because I don't have enough items to put in there. Let's just finish up some final outside shaping, and then we'll put some drill bits to her and get it cored out, or I should say hollowed out. Yeah, so I wanted to take a little bit of the chunkiness out of the base on this piece. I just found it was just too heavy looking on the very bottom. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of tapering it out. And, ideally, maybe it would have been a little bit tapered even further than what it is. But as you can see, I'm going to be running into the jaws here pretty soon. I could have moved further back off of the piece and then made it a little thinner, but I in the end, I was happy with it. I just would have probably liked to seen it a little bit thinner, more elegant looking on the very bottom. Time to drill this piece out. This is, I think I start with a 3/4 inch bit and then I go up to 1.5 inches. Again, this piece wasn't real deep, so it wasn't really a huge problem. I do believe that this is the smallest opening that I've worked with to date, because ordinarily the Jacob's chuck will fit completely inside of the hole, and as you can see here, it doesn't. So finally on to hollowing. I am using the one-way captive system. It has a laser attached to it as well. I didn't bother with going through the whole setup like I usually do. And what I did do this time though was kind of film my body position. So, you can see it's not a gigantic hollow form at all. So there was no need to use the steady rest. So I was happy about that because it doesn't impede the laser. And you'll see me moving the cut around, moving the laser around. I'm always constantly checking to make sure that the screws are tight and they haven't vibrated loose. And it's one of these things you have to keep doing, because if that laser that you're depending on to keep your wall thickness correct moves on you, then of course, like I said last week, you can go through the side of the hollow form, and that's going to be a bad day. So it's important to make sure you check those connections and to make sure that the laser is where you want it to be at all times. The other thing too, where the boring bar goes into the length that goes back to where the captive system is, those can work loose as well. So I don't check those as much as I probably should, but should always check those as well. Overall, I'm very happy with the one-way captive system that I have here, and I would not hesitate to buy it again if I had to. It's not cheap, but it's a really good product, and I do recommend getting one if you do any amount of hollowing. Here you can see I'm changing out knife profiles. So this one here doesn't vibrate too bad because it's not the right angle one. If you look at the cutter, it's not much far off of the center line of the tool. But again, there I am adjusting the laser, making sure everything is good. And one of the problems with having the different size, the boring bar, as you've seen in the beginning, is much more robust. And of course, this arm is a little thinner. So then you have issues with getting it at the right height. So, really the big issue is going to be the very little nub at the very bottom of the form. So most times when I use the boring bar, I'll go in, clean that nub up, because I know that when my tool rest is all the way down, that it's sitting at the right height. But with these smaller cutting arms, I definitely have to raise them up. And then you have to maybe kind of fool around with the right setting until you get it correctly. And if you're curious, I've got mine set at almost dead center, just slightly above dead center, and that usually will get rid of that little nub that probably most wood turners struggle with. And another thing on this piece, because of the shape of it, I was having a hard time extracting the shavings out of it. So a lot of times there was leftover shavings left in it. So that's another thing. But I do like this flat top hollow form look, and I've done a few of them on the channel here already. So anyway, I'm just really curious to see if you guys prefer hollow forms or bowls or what it is. You'll see some center work coming up, and I don't really do a whole lot of that, and that's just because I want to do a finial for this piece. But yeah, definitely love to hear your thoughts on what you guys prefer to watch. And another thing, I know that I've covered a lot of things on the channel. If there's something that I've yet to cover, then please leave a comment down below, and I'll see if I can cover that topic or not. Uh, I'm fairly knowledgeable in the wood turning world, and but I certainly don't know it all. That's for darn sure. And there's a lot of other people in the world that are a lot smarter than me, that I can tell you right now. And so anyway, if you've got a topic that you want me to cover that I haven't covered yet, please leave it in the comments down below. All right, I'm going to try and show you in here. It's a pretty small opening. Anyway, the very bottom is cut fairly clean. You can see some shavings down in there. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. This piece, I'm going to do something we haven't done before. I think I'm going to put a long finial on here. I've got some ebony or some blackwood that may go nicely with this. So that'll be tomorrow though, because it's the end of the day. So we'll see you then. Still working on this foot area. I just wasn't really happy with it at the end of the day. I don't typically do hollow forms the way that probably most people do. I don't know if that's because of my left-handed brain that I've got, but I'll get things to the very, very close dimension that I want on the outside, do the hollowing on the inside, and then just fine tune things afterwards. Now that was a 5/8 bowl gouge on its side, and you can see how it really cleans up that resin. Freshly sharpened gouge. And that's the first real look that we've had at this resin where it just, I was like, wow, this is going to be so cool after it gets buffed and the finish gets put on it. Big difference between the first one that we did and this one is that there is definite definition between the Blue Laguna and the Rainbow Blue. We didn't have that typically in the first Peacock hollow form. So, that's an improvement over the last one. So hopefully the next one that we do, I'll get it and we can put this behind us. Well, I just got done buffing this piece, and of course, I forgot to turn the camera on. So, I mean, this is with no finish on it. Will you look at that? That is just full of crazy goodness. What do you think it's going to look when the finish goes on it? Wow, eh? All right, so we're going to cut a finial for this. I think it'll look nice with tall, fancy finial. So that's why there's no finish on this. We'll get the finial fit to this, and then we can put the finish on both of them. All right, so initially I thought that this would look good with like a long black finial on it made out of blackwood or wingay, but it's not going to match with the base. So I pulled this from stock. This is again maple burl, so that should be the same or look the same. And yeah, I don't know, to me it just was clashing. I suppose a way around that would be to put a maple collar on here and then put either the blackwood or the wingay on top of that. But I think that we're just going to stick with the maple burl. The other issue I've got is this opening is quite small, so I don't really have a set of jaws that's the right size to hold this after we get a tenon put on it. But this should do the job. I'll do the majority of it when it's got some tailstock support, and then just pull the tailstock away when I'm finishing up, if you will. So on to making the finial. Now, this is not something that I do very often, so please hit me with kid gloves. I don't do a lot of center work. It's just really not my thing. So you'll see me use a variety of tools here. That's a spindle gouge, and it won't be long before you'll see a parting tool coming up here. You'll see me use the Scoochie gouge as well, which is a combination skew and gouge. And again, down in the link in the description, of course, you can find most of these tools. The vast majority of my tools are made by Crown, and I buy them at Lee Valley if you're curious. So this is obviously something that I don't do very often because I really don't like center work at all. But I do realize that there needs to be some sort of a fancy finial here. So, this is just an idea, and I know it's not drawn all that great. What can I'm good on a lathe, not so much with a pen. So, this is going to be kind of the basic thing, but of course, this is all 100 subject to change as we're going here. And this is one of the great things about being a wood turner. I originally came with that kind of vision in my head, but as you're working and whittling away this piece, you may change your mind. So, and I know that I've covered this in the past, that typically I step to the lathe and I don't have a clear plan in my head. I maybe have an idea as to what things are going to look like, but in the end, ultimately, it's up to the wood. And you know, sometimes over the years when I've been turning stuff, turning around flaws or trying to turn away cracks, knots, this kind of business, sometimes you end up with some very unique looking pieces. And, I don't know if that's in this category at all, but when you see me pause in kind of, you can't see me, but I'm stepping like right there. I'm stepping back and I'm looking at the piece on the lathe. And from there, I'm basing, what am I going to do from here? What's my next move? I did lay it out. I did kind of part in the areas where I wanted certain finials or decorations to start on this finial and where I wanted them to stop. So that's what I did initially. And I don't know if you noticed that, but I folded that drawing in half and then just used that as a template to lay out my lines on this finial. After looking at it when it's done, I think that I would have preferred to make it a lot thinner than it is, more delicate looking, if you will. So, if you've seen me make lids for boxes on the channel here, you know that this is one of the areas where I really struggle, and it's just something that I don't do very often. And so, you know, I think that I am getting better at it over the years. But to be perfectly honest with you, I rarely, and I do mean rarely, do any center work unless it is involving pepper mills. And as I've talked about that in the past, I'm not a huge fan of making those either. I find them to be very monotonous. And anyway, like I said earlier, I'm a bowl guy through and through, and that's what I like to make. But I certainly see a place for this in my work in the future. Now, this is a highly figurative piece of maple, and if you've turned any of this stuff, you know that it's really hard to get a really good um, tool finish on this work. You have to have really sharp tools, but I'm using the Osprey there, and it worked fantastic for this. It actually worked a lot better than I thought it was going to work. It's got a smaller cutter than the Hercules does, but I'll tell you right now, it really helped me go along here. And once I've got the form that I want, I'm just coming in with a scoochie gouge there and just, doing some fine touch up and detail work. And then, that's it. We'll be able to move on to sanding. The Working with these figurative woods, a lot of times I would use a bowl gouge, like my 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. And I do find that sometimes that will cut this wood cleaner than say a spindle roughing gouge or spindle gouge period. So that's a lot of times I would use my bowl gouge in that regard, but most people probably wouldn't. So just some hand sanding and then power sanding with the 3.5-inch dipple discs, and this piece will be done. Now, I don't know if you look on the very bottom of that finial, you can see some bite marks. So I had to put it back in the chuck, but keep it away from the very top part of the jaws. And then I just cleaned up that shoulder where it meets the urn, or not the urn, the hollow form. And now it looks a lot better. We are back again with the Waterlux Original Gloss. Well, our colors are missing, but wow, does that ever make up for it? There is absolutely zero purple and zero green in this piece at all that I can see. And there's no gold either. Well, I mean, that is some of the craziest resin I've done so far. And it's good to see that that technique certainly does that and does it well. So we will probably be seeing more of that in the future. But we're going to keep doing these until I get it figured out. But anyway, that is just crazy. So for the finial, all I'm going to do is put 2 coats by hand on like this. And then the last coat, what I'll do is I'll stick this in the chuck again and smooth it all out, probably with 4-0 steel wool. I don't know, I might buff as well. There you go. I mean, it's got some pretty awesome chatoyance in it. Let me turn this light here. Shed some light on the situation. Yeah, it's got some really nice chatoyance in it. Yep. For sure, for sure. Anyway, I'll do the second coat the same, and then, I don't know, maybe I'll show the third one or not. See you tomorrow. So this is basically how I prep the piece before finish, buff with the triply buffing compound, and then use the denatured alcohol to clean the surface of the wood prior to the first coat of finish, or actually I guess this would be the second coat of finish going on. This is the second coat of Waterlux Gloss, original. Well, it still looks pretty darn awesome. I'm not gonna lie. Wow, just crazy stuff, people. It's crazy stuff. Clouds and the sea and turbulence and I don't know, you name it. It's all in there. I think that the 2 coats are going to do it. The wood looks like it's been sealed up pretty good, so should be able to finish the bottom tomorrow. All right, we'll see you when we are doing the foot. Like I said, for this, I'm just going to mount it in the chuck, buff it, and then put another coat on it, and that'll be it for that. So here the hollow form is mounted onto my vacuum chucking system, and I actually only put 2 coats on the hollow form body and the finial. I found that there was no need to put a 3rd coat on the finial because it looked fantastic after the 2nd coat went on, so there was no need to do a 3rd coat. There was a screw hole in the bottom, as you can see here, so I left enough thickness where that wasn't going to be a factor. And the bottom of this piece was sanded from 80 to 320, which is typically what I do with wooden pieces. If it has resin in it, then I'll go to 800. There's a crack, so that had to be fixed. And all I did was fill it with some CA glue from Starbond and put it back on the vacuum chuck and then sanded it away until I had a nice flat surface ready for the signature. Okay, let's have a last final talk about this week's project. So we haven't hit our Peacock colors again. And you know, it's really fun trying to figure this out, and it's also really frustrating at the same time. So I really truly love the look. I'm going to take this finial off. Love the look at this very top of this. I mean, it is just stunning. There is color separation in the blues. Lots of the darker blues in here. The Blue Lagoon, I don't know if it's really showing up or if it's much of a factor. I think that the combination of the green with the blue is probably what's causing all of this busyness. And going down and pulling up that, I mean, it just really made some really cool pieces. So it's not what we wanted, but it is what we wanted. If that makes any sense. The size of this piece is 6.5 inches across the top, 4.5 inches tall on the body, and with the finial, it's 10 inches tall. I think that the maple burl top finial is a good match for the base. I think that maybe, like I said in the video, thinning this out, making it more elegant looking might look, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys. You tell me what you think. I'm always kind of critical of my work. I did have to sand this a little bit because the more coats of finish you put on the inside, so I sanded this down a little bit. Yeah, there's some bite marks there, but you know, I don't really, because it's just one of those sizes. If I had to use my other chuck with the jaws, it wouldn't have left those marks on it. So I just didn't have the right size to do that. But regardless, when it's inside, nobody's ever going to know anyway. Still need to put 2 more coats on the very bottom, and then it will be done as well. I actually just buffed it off with a little bit of steel wool before shooting this here. And so yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about this week's video. And of course, that's where we're going to pick the winner of the 70,000 subscriber giveaway bowl, or whatever it's going to be. We're going to pick from the comments. And don't forget to put designer epoxy in there all by itself to be entered into the 3-gallon giveaway draw, which we're going to do at 70,000 as well. And of course, that's only for Canada and the lower 48 US states. All right, well, that's it. Please let me know what you think. And please let me know if you want to see more bowls, if you want to see more hollow forms. And I guess that's it. Till next week, take care, stay safe. Don't forget that bell. Please share my videos with your friends. See you next week.